Aloha, I'm Mrs. Fisher, and today we're going to be looking at grammar concept number 9. We're looking at verb shifts in mood and active-passive voice. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So what are verb moods and why are they important? Okay, so here are the different verb moods. We have indicative, imperative, interrogative, conditional, and subjunctive. The indicative mood is used to express facts. The indicative mood examples, for example, are Mrs. Fisher teaches us English, the students learn English, the world improves. All of those, they're just statements of fact. And as you recall, we talked about imperative sentences and where they had the command or made a request. And that's the same as the imperative mood. The imperative mood is used to make commands or make requests. And they have that understood you in it, right? So, teach English, you teach us English. Please do your best. Please, you do your best. Keep your eyes on your own work. Please, you keep your eyes, or keep your eyes, you keep your eyes on your own work, right? All right. The interrogative sounds just like if you interrogate somebody, you're asking them questions, right? So if you go into an interrogation room, if you've heard about that on TV, that's just asking questions. So interrogative is used when asking questions. Who knows the answer to number 3? Are you being graded on accuracy? Those are questions. The conditional mood is used to make a request or expression of under what conditions something would happen. It usually uses a helping or an auxiliary verb like might, would, could, should. So for example, Mrs. Fisher, so this is kind of conditional, right? It depends on something. It has a condition to it. Mrs. Fisher should teach us English and rap songs. I do. Then we could remember complex concepts easily. You do. That might be more fun than listening to lectures. I hope it is. All right. So here's some more helping verbs so that you can remember them. So let's look at this helping verb rap.
All right, helping verbs. Verbs, helping verbs. All the helping verbs. Helping verbs. Helping verbs. Helping verbs. Somebody call 911. Hey, helping verbs. Let's begin. With am, is, are, was, were, and being bad. 6 more helping verbs that aren't so bad. Are, did, does, do, and have, has, had. The last 9 are very easy to say. Shall, must, can, would, should, could, and will, might, may. 23 helpers you learned today. We have helping verbs. Helping verbs. Helping verbs. Somebody call 911. What does a helping verb help? It helps another verb, like the verb help. I am helping, he is helping, we are helping, he was helping, we were helping, I'll be helping, he's been helping, he did help, he does help, they do help, I have helped, she has helped, he had help, I shall help, I must help, you can help, you would help, I should help, I could help, I will help, I might help, I may help. The only one I couldn't get was being. Can you help? Helping verbs. Helping verbs. Somebody call 911.
Loud. All right, so those verbs, as I'm sure you noticed, you're like, wait a second, how come those verbs sound a lot like my Linking verbs. Well, it depends on how they're functioning, right? So a helping verb is going to come before another verb, and it's helping what? Helping a verb. So, the other is subjunctive mood. When you have subjunctive mood, like conditional mood, subjunctive mood expresses wishes or suggestions, desires or possibilities, and is usually indicated by an indicative verb such as wish, suggest, ask, propose, recommend, require, insist, and urge. There's other ones, but those are just used. Or it can be expressed as a hypothetical situation. I wish I were 21 again. See that hypothetical? Subjunctive uses were. Normally, I was. So this is why subjunctive mood verb choice is even important. In a regular sentence, if you said I, you would say I was. You wouldn't say I were. It would be they were. I was. So, but in a subjunctive case, when you have I wish I were, now that's the correct term to use. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Normally, it would be if I was you, right? I was, not I were. It's they were. So that's why it's important for you to understand that what is the subjunctive mood case to make sure that it's okay to use it in that tense. It already sounds good to you because you're used to it if you are, you've been speaking English your whole life. So I suggest he cover his mouth and nose with his mask. And normally you would say he covers, not he cover. But the correct way to do it in the subjunctive mood is to say, I suggest he cover his mouth and nose with his mask. All right. Shifts in verb mood errors. When a shift in mood occurs, the subject of the sentence doesn't change, but the mood of the verb does. So you need to keep that same mood throughout the sentence. Here's an example of a verb mood error shift. First, rise to your feet, and then you should address the class. It doesn't sound horrible to say, but you have a shift in verb mood. Notice the mistake is that you have the imperative mood, where you said rise, with the conditional mood, should address. This is an error. When a shift in mood occurs, the subject of the sentence doesn't change, but the mood of the verb does. So, because you said rise to your feet, and then you should address the class, since we're using imperative, you say first rise to your feet and then address the class. If you wanted to change that from imperative to the conditional, then you need to do that in the beginning of the sentence so they're both the same. First, you should rise to your feet, and then you should address the class. Both are now conditional. When a shift in mood occurs, the subject of the sentence doesn't change, but the mood of the verb does. So here's another wrong example. Honey, get a frozen turkey so that we might thaw, stuff, and cook it for Christmas. So here we have imperative and conditional. You don't want to have those two in one sentence. You want to keep it imperative, imperative, or conditional, conditional. But where there is a difference is you can have conditional and subjunctive sometimes in the same sentence, and that is okay. So it is okay here where you have conditional and subjunctive in the same sentence. Honey, I suggest we get a frozen turkey so that we might thaw, stuff, and cook it for Christmas. So now you can see that you have this subjunctive case going on along with this conditional case. All right. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing for you, but as long as you're really careful when you're reading your choices, you should be okay. What is verb voice? Now, when it comes to verb voice, this is an important topic because I have to tell you that active and passive voice is so important that when I was in the military, if you wrote anything in passive voice, it was kicked back and you had to rewrite it. And now that I'm getting my doctorate degree, my professor said if you write any sentences in passive voice, you're going to be docked for you'll be counted off for passive voice. Which made me say, oh my goodness, this isn't just something that the kids need to understand and know. It's something for the rest of their life. It's called clarity of voice. So you want to have it in active voice for clarity. So let's look at what is active and passive anyway.
Things to avoid. Passive voice. Don't be passive. In your essay, when you choose a word, avoid weak passive verbs. Avoid voice tells if the subject receives or does the action. Is it active or passive? It all depends. If the subject does the action, it's in the active voice. If the subject receives the action, check the passive choice. Active means the subject does the action. Subject first, action last. Active voice. Mrs. Fisher walked across the room and she walked fast. Mrs. Passive voice flips the subject and the verb you see. The passive voice, the room was walked across quickly by me. Passive. A verb in the passive voice contains a form of be. Like am, is, are, was, were, and been, being, be. Passive future tense and perfect tense have one more thing to add. A past participle, shall, will, have, and has or had. In your essay, when you choose a word, always choose active, not the passive verb. Always choose active, not the passive verb.
All right, so I actually whenever I'm writing, I send it through a like a Grammarly kind of thing. I use Word document and I do an edit on it to make sure there's no passive voice. And whenever there is, it doesn't tell you how to fix it. It just tells you it's passive and they suggest you fix it. And they say, this would be clearer if the subject was doing the action. So I'm like, oh, active voice. So in the active voice, the subject of the sentence performs the action. The teacher walks across the room. The students learn English. The teacher's work and the students' knowledge improved the world. So we want active voice. Whatever's doing the action. Passive voice, the room was walked across by the teacher. The English grammar skills were learned by the students. The world was improved by the teacher's work and by the students' knowledge. That doesn't sound terrible. That's why we accidentally use passive voice. But if you see the by and that be verb in there, am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been, and it's not acting as your predicate nominative or as a helping verb, then it's probably making it a passive sentence. All right, so here's another example. Active voice. Wild penguins attacked my sister. So you can see the penguins are doing the action. Passive voice, my sister was attacked by wild penguins. Notice we have the am, is, are, was, were, be, verb, and we have that by there. All right, let's see if you can identify them. Shift in verb, voice, and mood errors. Verb, voice, and mood should remain the same throughout the sentence. When verb, voice, and mood shift, your readers can become confused, so it is important to spot shifts in verb, voice, and mood and to correct them. So, active voice errors. Explained. When the subject of a sentence shifts, the verb almost always shifts with it. Shifting from one voice to another in the same sentence makes the sentence difficult to understand. Rob liked playing school volleyball, and beach volleyball was also enjoyed by him. So there's a shift there. Rob liked playing school volleyball, and he liked playing beach volleyball. Now the shift has been corrected and it no longer sounds confusing. So think subject does the action for clarity and correctness. So this is a wrong way to say it. We were given the test to take and we took the test and did very well. Well, who gave the test? We need to know who for clarity. So this one, My teacher gave us a test to take, and we took the test and we did very well. Now we have clarity. So here's another wrap that will explain consistency in person, point of view, and voice. By the way, this was me as a coach for cheerleading, and here's my daughter here. These are my cheerleaders from Lanakila Baptist.
Sentence construction, shifts in number, person, point of view, voice, main tense. Keep it straight. You can do this, Ladybug. Number consistency should remain. It will. Person should not change. Subject point of view. It needs to be kept the same. Subject voice should be active, but must be maintained. And a consistent verb tense should be your aim. Number consistency should remain. It is incorrect to say, if a woman gets married, they can change their name. Instead, say, if a woman gets married, she can change her name. Person should not change. It is incorrect to say, if she gets married, one can change her name. Instead, say, if she gets married, she can change her name. Subject point of view needs to be kept the same. It is incorrect to say, I want a name change, even though my new name to me will seem strange. Instead, say, I want a name change, even though I think my new name will seem strange. Voice should be active, but must be maintained. It is incorrect to say, because I got married, a new name was taken by me. Instead, say, because I got married, I took a new name. And a consistent verb tense should remain. It is incorrect to say, she went to the DMV and changes her name. Instead, say, she went to the DMV and changed her name.
I don't miss being too many. I love being a fisher. All right, so we want to keep number consistency. So things to remember. All right, so now let's try identifying some verb tense errors and correcting them. So please correct these sentences. When I walk around the neighborhood, I took or take breaks on the benches. Number 2. After dinner, I watch television and will play or play on my phone. Number 3. I would start a new career if I were or was you. All right, let's fix some active passive voice errors. Well, no, actually I just want you to identify each sentence as either active or passive voice. When I walk around the neighborhood, I take breaks on the benches. Number 2, is this active or passive? After dinner, I watch television and play on my phone. Okay, so identify the correct person to avoid a shift in person. When you walk around the neighborhood, one or you can take breaks on the benches. After dinner, one watches television. After dinner, one watches television. One or he can play on his phone. Number 3. The students and I took our test and we or one scored well. All right. Now you are done with today's lesson. Good job on today. Now we are going to recap what we've learned so far. Let's remember, when we capitalize proper nouns, but not common nouns. Brand names, but not the common name next to it. We capitalize titles when they come before a person's name, but not titles alone in place of a name. We capitalize the direct address always, the first word in every sentence, and in every poetry line. We capitalize races, nationalities, states, countries, regions, religions, streets, cities, highways, bodies of water, mountains, proper noun abbreviations, specific courses, languages. We capitalize days of the week, months of the year, and special calendar events, but not seasons like fall, spring, winter, or summer. We learned in grammar number 2 that whenever we summarize, paraphrase, or quote, we must include the in-text citation, must have the author's name and the page number. We learned how to do that for quoted evidence by using these signal words in accordance with or according to. So for quoted evidence, in accordance with Herbert Hoover, comma, space, quote, and then in quotes, word for word, what you got out of his reading. Paraphrased evidence is always in your own word and in your own style, so you don't put it in quotes, it's in your own words, in your own style. And summarized is also in your own words, in your own style. When you're doing the SBA, you always use quoted evidence unless they specifically ask you to paraphrase or summarize. Then they're testing to see if you know not to put in quoted evidence. It must be in your own words and in your own style. All right, when you proofread, make sure you use that spell check. Make sure that every sentence is not a fragment or a run-on, and capitalize, punctuate, do everything perfectly. You are being counted for and against by your grammar. So please, 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 you know what to do. Take your time and reread it and do it right. All right, sentences all start with a capital letter and they end with a punctuation mark. You must have a subject and a verb, and it must make a complete thought. The imperative sentence has the understood you. Adjectives describe nouns and pronouns and come before the words they modify. Adverbs describe adjectives and adverbs and verbs, and they can come before or after the words they modify. When you're writing dialogue, every time the speaker changes, you change lines. You put in quotes, exactly what the speaker says, and you have these taglines that come before or after what this person said. The tagline is separated with a comma. Not with a punctuation mark. All right. When you are trying to find the correct subject-verb agreement and you have a word like almost, any, none, and some, you know that you have to look at the object of the preposition in order to find out which one to use. So let's try these. Any one of the dogs is or are welcome to join my pack. Anybody with credentials was or were allowed to present. Someone with dreadlocks is or are asked about my project. Asked. Somebody around our street block was or were parking in my spot. None of the workers is or are tired. None of the wind is or are hitting the house. Some of the project was or were finished. Some of the projects was or were finished. So remember your little hints and tricks when you're doing those. All right, direct addresses are always capitalized and they're always set apart with a comma, and the direct address is who you're directly talking to. Lance, I'm glad that you are my son-in-law. An appositive is put in commas only if you can take it out of the sentence and know who you're referring to. So remember, an appositive is a noun that follows another noun. It renames or identifies it and may be compound. So Tony, comma, my son is the light of my life. In this case, we could take Tony out because he's a proper noun. We can take my son out and know who we're talking about. Here, my daughter's not the proper noun. It's a common noun, so we need Nikki, so we don't put commas around it. All right. And when we are looking at our objective and indirect objects, we know that really what we're trying to boil all this down to is how to choose those pronoun references. And the pronouns that we have for subjective case are I, you, he, she, it, we, they, who, and whoever. Objective, me, you, him, her, it, us, them, whom, and whomever. We remembered that we have we have Cookie Monster with our MM for our objects. Predicate nominatives follow those linking verbs, am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been, and they rename or identify the subject of the clause. Subjective ones are I, you, he, she, it, we, they, who, and whoever. So remember, if they're in the beginning or the end of the sentence, it's always the subjective case if you have that linking verb. Predicate nominative, renaming it. So Mrs. Fisher is the teacher. Mrs. Fisher is she, not is her. Because it's that linking verb. So normally you say, Mrs. Fisher bought her flowers. So you'd always put her at the end of the sentence, right? Because that's the object. But now, if it's renaming me, Mrs. Fisher is she, not her. Because you flip that order and the predicate nominative is in the subject case. You wouldn't say, I am she. All right, she is fine, but you wouldn't say me. Or for clarity, when you're writing, use active, voice, and verb tense consistency. Therefore, write sentences where the subject's doing the action, not receiving the action. State sentences in the same grammatical form. Think past, 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 present, 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 future, future, future. If you're using has, had, or have for helping verbs, remember that had is past tense, has is present tense, and future tense is will have. And now we are done and done. Great job today. I hope you weren't confused, and I hope that you're keeping up with all of these great grammar things. You're going to do wonderful on your SBA. Have a nice day.